Hello and welcome to the Mobalytics patch 11.4 tier list. I'm Danox Harrison and we have a fair chunk of changes to get through, particularly in the jungle, so let's get stuck straight in. Starting off with the top lane, in the god tier we have Cho'Gath, Garen and Malphite, and the S tier we have Wukong, Sion, Nasus, Darius, Shen and Gnar. We haven't seen too many changes in the top lane this patch. On the back of the changes from 11.3, we saw the Bruiser combo of Gordrinket and Sterix nerfed, but ultimately Gordrinket is still really powerful, and although we're seeing Sterix a bit less often, it's still performing well. As a result, there haven't been too many shakeups and things have remained mostly static. We have seen nerfs to Moonstone, and ultimately the champs utilising it in the top lane just weren't performing well or even really being played on low elo, so they've been moved off the list. Kicking things off, we have Wukong, and he's rising in popularity, and a significant factor is he actually has an okay matchup into Gnar. He has the ability to challenge him consistently when he's mini, and has the ability to dip away when he goes mega. When it comes to snowballing, he can do it incredibly well, and he functions great as a disruptor in team fights, able to dive onto enemy backlines and cause huge issues with his ultimate. And with the Bruiser itemization at the moment, he can take a decent beating as well. When you're playing Wukong, look to find flanks to approach teamfights and you'll have a far easier time getting into a great position. TP can be particularly effective at setting this up. There is a deep ward behind the enemy team, especially when you're setting up for an objective like Dragon, Baron or a tower. Next up is Nasus, and he's a champion that we highlighted not too long ago, but he's still caning people to death in the top lane. He's really solid into a bunch of melee matchups, able to go toe to toe and often wins duels once he hits level 6. Into range matchups, he can withstand the early pressure and eventually is able to shrug them off with the power of his Wither. As Nasus maxes his Q and starts to accumulate stacks, he becomes an absolute monster in the mid game, really hard to kill and decimates anyone who gets too close. Currently, Divine Sundra is a really solid pickup for him, amplifying his Q damage, giving a bunch of ability haste, and critically, the mythic passive offers both magic and armor pen, so not only will your Qs hit harder, but your ultimate drain and your E will get value from this as well. Finally, for the top lane is Riven, and she received a slight change but it had a massive impact in 11.3, and that was taking away 2 seconds CD on her E, and actually has a massive effect as it has a really high AD scaling, and since she prioritizes ability haste so heavily, she's capable of reducing the cooldown by a significant amount. Currently the build she favours is a more bruiser build, so unlike Glass Cannon Riven, you're not quite as capable as one-shotting people in a quick combo, but you're not too far off that and your survivability is much higher. Riven is a really high skill cap champion, and that's the reason she's staying in A tier at low elo. However, despite that, we're still seeing positive overall stats at the gold level, and it only gets better above that point. Picking up Riven is a massive investment to be able to play her optimally, but if you're someone with a lot of Riven experience or a lot of time and you're keen to learn the champion, then now is a good time to capitalize on her strength. Alternatively, if you hate this champion with a passion, then it might be time to start banning her. Moving on to the jungle. In the god tier we had Udyr, Skarner and Rammus, and in the S tier we have Hecarim, Nunu, Evelynn, Rek'Sai, Ivern, Kha'Zix and Elise. Now the jungle saw massive changes on this patch. Experience and gold was heavily nerfed across all of the non-buff jungle camps. This really hurt farming junglers who rely on being able to consistently clear to get ahead. Currently, higher elos see farming junglers absolutely excelling and dominating the meta, but in lower elos they're actually not as successful, and as a result this isn't going to have huge consequences in this list, but you'll see the farming junglers who are doing okay are now really struggling, and the more gank heavy junglers are looking better and better, tanks as well. The end result is if clearing your jungle is less valuable, then ganking's relative value goes up, so junglers who flourish from applying consistent pressure to the enemy laners and finding gank angles like Rek'Sai, Evelynn and Elise are all going to be really solid picks on this patch. With changes like these, it's always a little hard to predict the exact impact they'll have, and there's usually a lot of knock-on effects, but at lower ranks, ganking junglers were already doing well, so I think you can have some confidence in them irrespective of how much an impact these changes have on the meta. First up is Evelynn, and Evelynn is a champion who can absolutely take over the game, and although she's slower to start than some counterparts, once she hits 6 she's incredibly frustrating to deal with. Permanent invisibility combined with an execute that doubles as an escape makes it not only hard to track her down, but hard to kill her even if you do. If you're playing Evelynn, then you have to be really cautious about being invaded or going for risky ganks before level 6. Tracking the enemy jungler is important to ensure you don't cross paths before you're ready. Ganks are still possible, especially if lanes are overextended, but just be cautious for counter ganks. Once you hit 6, then you not only have the freedom to go more aggressive thanks to your invisibility, but your kill pressure skyrockets and you can easily look to pick off unsuspecting targets who step too far forwards. Evelynn is incredibly snowbally, but can also feel a bit useless when behind, so it's important to understand the matchups and pick her with caution so you don't get destroyed. Rek'Sai is an example of a champion who can make her life difficult and counteract her kit. Rolling onto the scene is Rammus, and he is smashing things up at lower ranks. Chem Tank did wonders for him, and the power afforded to the AD carry role gives him massive value as he is essentially an anti-AD champion. Couple that with the nerfs to farming junglers and he's going to be able to look for frequent ganks and not fall as far behind due to clearing less of his jungle. Rammus is really good at ganking longer lanes as his speed allows him to close down on almost any target, but be cautious about where the minion wave is as it can stop you in your tracks. Considering he's a tank, Rammus does a really high amount of damage and is capable of finding duels, especially once he hits 6, but it really depends on what champion you're trying to target. Certain champions do have a bit too much sustain, especially the Gore Drinker abusers for you to 100-0 them, whereas squishy AD carries are a great target to try and take down. Generally, short range champions or ones you can get on top of struggle to handle Rammus due to his CC. His taunt is a great tool for shutting down a high value opponent. Bramble Vest is a solid early pickup when you're facing healing, as your taunt forces opponents to auto you, and Thorn Mail applies 60% grievous wounds when you CC them. If you're playing into Rammus, then a big thing to watch out for is his W, defensive ball kill. When you auto him with it up, you take huge amounts of damage for doing so, and his resistances also skyrocket, so just simply don't even touch him till it's down. I see too many lower ranked AD carries just fire autos into him as it's what they're used to doing. If they can auto something, then they auto something. But the best thing to do is wait out the cooldown either by hitting someone else or simply holding back, and then once it has dropped, he's significantly easier to take out and you won't be damaging yourself so much by doing so. Last for the junglers is Vi, and she is a really strong ganking jungler who's great at shutting down those high priority champions you're tired of dealing with. She's a really solid pick at lower ranks as a kit is simple and effective. Ganking is really powerful if you find your way into a lane, as a knockback on her Q is a great tool to keep your opponents from escaping, but the damage is also pretty massive. Her sustain damage is decent as well, but it's her ability to burst a target that makes her excel, and she's actually got a bit of wiggle room in terms of getting punished. Being able to escape over terrain with a Q makes it harder to pick off or catch out, and when in doubt about hitting your Q, you can simply open with your R to guarantee they're standing still. If you are playing Vi, then be on the watch for enemy champions buying stopwatches or Zhonyas as they heavily negate your ultimate. Sometimes it's worth it to ult them still if they're in a bad position and your team is there to follow up, but if you're diving into 5 members of the enemy team and your target suddenly turns golden, then you're gonna be having a bad time. Moving on to the mid lane, and the god tier we have Seraphine, Kassadin and Anivia, and in the S tier we have Nico, Annie, Malzahar, Pantheon, Galio, Fizz, Echo, Victor and Katarina, quite a few now. In terms of champion changes, we haven't seen too much in the mid lane, but the big shift up is Everfrost being buffed substantially. It's had its cast time shortened, its build path strengthened by including a Kindle gem, so you're not sitting on as much gold before completing, and it has also had its HP increased by 50, and then on top of all that, the active damage has been buffed. These changes actually put it in a really good spot, and any champions who sync with it will be doing really well on the back of that. I actually also expect to see champions like Orianna, who are pretty flexible with their items, look to pick it up. Give it a try, see how it goes. I really think this item's looking strong now. We also saw Cosmic Drive change, so instead of giving movement speed on spell hit, it now gives 20 ability haste and flat movement speed after you have 160 AP. This gives the item a total of 40 ability haste when you hit that breakpoint, and the flat movement speed is really strong. With the first item mythic like Ludens or Everfrost, you'll already have around 160 AP once you complete Cosmic Drive, so expect to see this frequently picked up as a second or third item and give a ton of maneuverability to mages. Kassadin is someone we actually highlighted last week, but due to the Everfrost changes, I think it was important to bring him up again as he's looking really scary. Verdant Barrier and Seekers were both strong items he could pick up to help survive laning phase, and that's a big reason why he's doing so well. But the reason this patch is going to be even better is he's one of the few champions who are building Everfrost as their most common mythic, and with it getting buffed massively, he's going to be the champion most affected. Being able to dash to set up the root and having more damage on it, more HP and a shorter cast time just means he's going to be even more of a threat. Kassadin is always going to be a little underwhelming in the early game, but he has tools to navigate it, and as long as you're willing to forego a little pressure, then you won't be too concerned as your late game is so strong. With jungle experience and gold being nerfed as well, there isn't as much of a requirement for you to have priority mid lane, as you won't have a Graves or Nidalee invading and stealing your jungler's camps and ending up 3 levels ahead of everyone. It's the perfect time to abuse Kassadin, and he's really effective into a ton of choice matchups. Seraphine is an example of one of our god tier mids who he's great into, as you just can't pressure him enough to deny his scaling, and she lacks the damage to cut through him later on. Now, Nico is a champion who really started to hurt from the loss of a Glacial Augment build combined with Hextech GLP, but with Everfrost buffs and an already decent win rate, she looks to be in a really good spot for 11-4. Setting up your combo with Everfrost or even catching a long range E and being able to chain CC with the item and then landing your ultimate makes her such a devastating pick champion. Even just the fact it's adding more burst to your combo makes her really threatening, and she still holds so much strength when it comes to teamfight, as if she can get to the enemy backline she can absolutely decimate them with a huge ultimate. Cosmic Drive is a really nice second item for it to pick up, as the extra movement speed goes a long way with helping them maneuver into great positions to land game winning ultimates. Now Morgana is a champion who's been honestly slept on a fair bit in the mid lane. She really negates a lot of picks thanks to her great clear, and current itemization is really strong for her. Liandry's has been her go-to mythic and is still a strong option, but with the changes to Everfrost I expect to see that open up as an alternative. The amount of control she offers is really hard to match in terms of landing CC and doing pretty huge damage to squishier targets. Cosmic Drive is another item I think she syncs with really well, as being able to get in close to land an ultimate is a super powerful tool when it comes to team fights. With the sheer power of some champions at the moment, with bruisers being almost unkillable and AD carries doing a lot of damage, having utility mid has a lot of value, and you're still building AP, so it's not like you aren't outputting damage yourself, just a big portion of her strength is a lockdown she offers on top of the black shield. Back down to the bot lane for the broken role AD carry. In the god tier we have Jhin, Seraphine and Kai'Sa, and the S tier we have Jinx, Tristana, Ashe, Misfortune, Senna, Swain and Vayne. AD carries saw a spread of changes, slight buffs to Ginsu as a mortal reminder, and then some tweaks to individual AD carries. Varus has his W active buffed, and it's actually really going to hit at this point, but he's still kind of underwhelming overall, so he's not rated too highly. Caitlyn got some minor tweaks to her AD and attack speed scaling, and Caitlyn buffs can always have a huge impact on the game, as we saw not too long ago, but I think as these are more scaling buffs, they're not going to be enough for it to take over. Jinx got a 60 base health buff, and she was already looking good from the buffs last patch, but this is a revert they did from the compensation nerf on 11.3. With this change, I think she's in a really good spot. Harder to punish in lane and feeling the full effect of those sizable buffs from last patch, which were to her range and her attack speed with rockets, and also actually to her activation of chompers, so really nice positive changes. Samira got absolutely gutted this patch. It kind of feels like Riot accepted her creation was a mistake and decided she wouldn't get to see play again because these nerfs feel excessive. Obviously Samira was super powerful when she was first released, but she's been steadily nerfed again and again, and this last one is an ankle breaker. She can no longer dash to allies, her dash is slower, her W lasts less time, her QAD ratio is lower early, her passive melee bonus damage is significantly lower early, and her ult CD is increased. I think a couple of these nerfs could have been okay, but even then, Samira isn't the best performing champion right now. Her stats aren't amazing, and even in pro play, we aren't seeing her prioritized nearly as highly as Kai'Sa or a range of other AD carries. Starting off, we are looking at Tristana, and she's continuing to do well and will keep doing so, as she's a solid answer into Kai'Sa, who's one of our god tier at the moment. Her all-ins are really powerful, and she's great at being paired with champions like Rel, Leona and Alistar, and looking for kills in lane and beyond. When playing Trist, you're actually a really strong duelist, so waiting in bushes for someone to pass by can allow you to find solo picks, but make sure you have some vision so you know you aren't diving into 3 of the enemy team instead of just 1. Trist's build has a really nice 2-item spike, and the Storm Rays allows you to easily stack up your bomb thanks to the slow, and that coincides nicely with the Kraken Slayer and powered auto. Sivir has received a ton of buffs since she was last in the meta, and they're starting to add up and put her in a decent spot. Combine that with a powerful build path with Gale Force giving her more movement speed and a dash, and Essence Reaver giving her burst as well, and some needed ability haste, and she's in a solid position. Her short range still makes some matchups in lane trickier, but she has a lot of damage thanks to her boomerang blade, and she's always good at picking up farm, clearing waves, and scaling into a monster. A reason why she's so good late game is her ability to auto reset really easily with her W. If you auto then instantly press W, you'll fire 2 autos in really quick succession, and later in the game this can be 2 back-to-back crits which can decimate squishier targets. Positioning is key with Sivir, as a short range forces her a bit too close compared to other AD carries, but having Spell Shield, a ton of movement speed and Gale Force allows her to navigate tricky situations when played well. And it's been weeks and weeks, but Jhin is still performing extremely well in the AD carry role. Despite his mythics being nerfed again and again and him having to jump from one item to the next, he's still performing solidly, and his ability to shove waves, harass and scale into a monster just make him so hard to deal with. I'd actually say that Gale Force Jhin is probably the most frustrating to play against, as once he gets a few items, the speed at which he moves around is insane thanks to his passive granting him movement speed on a crit. Combine that with him having a dash and his signature huge burst, and it's a frustrating experience unless you're playing him. Jhin pairs really well with champions who have their own CC, as once it's landed he can easily follow up with his W and then start landing autos or even pop his ult. Dash is a great combo, as not only are you getting that extra dash from Gale Force, but now you have the lantern for even more safety. Moving to the support role. In the god tier we have Rel, Leona and Seraphine, and the S tier we have Janna, Soraka, Alistar, Lulu, Zillion, Bard and Thresh. Support honestly wasn't touched too much. Moonstone got toned down a bit early, and although it's a significant nerf, I think the item was really overperforming and will still be fine afterwards. Other than that, it's only Braum who got a buff to his ult cooldown, but it's not really going to change anything for him. Likely the AD carry changes will have a bigger impact on the support pool with regards to synergy and tricky matchups changing. Starting off with Leona, she has been sitting at the top for a really long time. Her roll-in threat, damage, and ability to soak so much damage herself makes her super powerful. A lot of champions can find powerful lanes with her. Jhin, Kai'Sa, and Tristana are examples of champions who can help her apply threat, and honestly her presence just shuts down so many picks. A lot of strong champions struggle when facing against Leona as they get so much less room to maneuver. Particularly enchanters who want to be able to get out of the laning phase to scale up don't get given that opportunity. If you are playing here, then a great way to catch your opponents off guard is to use your E then flash, as it gives barely any reaction time. It's really effective when playing into lanes like Thresh or Janna who can interrupt your Zenith Blade with their knockups. Alistar is on fire at the moment, particularly with Chem Tank being so cheap. It's a great pickup to help his engages while also keeping him tanky. Phase Rush is something that's been around for a while, and although Aftershock Alistar is still a thing, I'm a big fan of Phase Rush, as after you land your combo, you get a ton of movement speed so you can stay on your opponents to land your empowered auto and stun them, or you can use that movement speed to disengage if you feel like you've overstepped. It's a really fun combo to play, and running with Hex Flash as well means you can permanently threaten your lane opponents even when your flash is down. Alistar has a ton of playmaking potential, and if you can reliably land his combo, then you can make a huge impact in games. The one major weakness he has is his level 1 lane. Without having his W and Q to use together, you can't apply too much pressure and can get zoned away and poked out, so be aware of this and be ready to play defensive until you hit at least level 2. Now Shaco is a bit of a wildcard support to bring out, but he's actually doing really well at lower elos. Despite nerfs to it, Mandate is still a great pickup for him, allowing his boxes to do a ton of damage, and the amount of control he can have is insane. Obviously a big factor for support is throwing down wards, but with Shaco, not only are you providing vision but leaving a trap to frustrate and chunk your opponents. Shaco is also a great roaming support, as once you leave lane you can go a bit more aggressive than other supports, as you have your Q to get out of tricky situations, and if you move towards mid lane or invade the enemy jungle, then you can use that invisibility to find a great gank, essentially the same as how jungle Shaco would do so. Shaco doesn't have the greatest amount of peel and also is a bit unique in how he's played support, so if you are going to give him a go, it'd be worth trying it in a normal game and ensuring you're paired with an AD carry who doesn't need too much peel and protection to survive. I'm not sure I'd want a Shaco support if I was playing Jinx into Draven or Leona, for example. One of the key things is maintaining control of the brushes in your lane. As long as you have your boxes down, it's very hard for the enemies to move in, and you can use their lack of vision to harass them and allow your AD carry to auto them for free. Now that wraps things up for 11.4. Hope this has been helpful and you feel a bit more clued up on the coming patch. Be sure to head on over to mobalytics.gg if you want to see the whole tier list laid out in full, and subscribe if you want to keep up to date on all our tier list videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.